Hey Josh, how are you, man?
I am better than I can even say. I mean, this is beyond exciting. I am,
Bro, you're
yeah.
so kind. You're so kind. This is amazing.
Well, I want to start by saying there's probably only one of you in this whole generation. So this is truly an honor. And I'm blown away by the insight of your book. So to be able to share it with a community of CEOs, of visionaries, of founders, it's such an honor. So thank you so much.
As I said, I am humble and I'm honored to be chatting with you.
Well, thank you. So let's dive in, shall we?
Yes, sure, absolutely.
All right. So I believe if Robin Williams from the Dead Poet Society came back to life as a teacher to entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
this would be you. So as I've gotten to know your work, you'll get a word in a moment, but I just want to say your life's work, the book you've written, all you do, it is so inspirational to entrepreneurs. It dares us to discover what we're capable of out there in the world of business, but also what's inside. And you're not just a teacher, you're an entrepreneur. You've achieved, you're out there slugging it out. You built a company decades back that hit over 30 billion bucks in valuation. You've built a whole bunch of companies. Two of your companies now are epic. One of them gets you as the only person in history to have gotten permission to fly to the moon. You're the only one who's gotten that right. And for good reason. We'll get into that. Bless you. Bless you for all you're doing. But the second company is every bit as ambitious and is looking to make disease optional. So you're a player. These are big plays. And it is extraordinary to be able to share what you're doing. There are genuinely precious nuggets of wisdom in what we're going to share here. So thank you so much for joining me and the community here.
Thank you, Josh. You're just very kind with your words. Thank you.
I'm trying to be accurate. So let's dive into it. Enough of the niceties. You are a misfit. You're a rebel. You are the kind of person Steve Jobs warned us about in that epic commencement speech, but he gave a speech about people like that. You actually wrote a book about the misfits, about the dreamers. Now, those people are what you call moonshot entrepreneurs. So tell us about you, if you would, to open up, and tell us what it means to be a moonshot entrepreneur.
I mean, interesting thing is that every one of us somehow sets the limit to our own imagination of what we can achieve. Even the people who love us the most, they set the limit for us. You are brilliant, young man. You can do whatever you want. Sky is the limit, right? And they don't realize that sky doesn't exist. Sky is simply the figment of our imagination. A limit or the barrier that we see, we cannot cross until we get there and we realize there was no barrier. That means our barriers are created in our own mind, in our own imagination. You know, you are brown, you can't do that. You're black, you can't do that. You're born in a poor family, you can't do that. You don't have connection, you can't do that. And the answer to all of them are, these are imaginary sky hurdles that we create for ourselves because that gives us the security and safety of what, we can't cross that. So why bother going there, right? In fact, what I realize is that the only thing we can't achieve in our lives are the things we can't imagine. Everything else is actually solvable. In fact, you would argue the day before any breakthrough, it is a crazy idea. And the day after breakthrough, it's an obvious idea. And that is really the thing, is the people who are called crazy, once they solve the problem, everyone turns around and say, I always knew that was going to happen. I always knew that was quite possible. In fact, I told him to go out and do that.
So it sounds like it makes so much sense. But then when we step back a bit, when we zoom out and take a look at history, we see that every generation has its myths. And you talk about this, right? The Greeks had their myths. They spoke about Zeus and Aphrodite. They did not see this as a myth. It wasn't mythology back then. Zeus existed. So what are our myths? The things that we believe they're so clearly true, but we don't even know that these are our myths. And so I'd love you to talk about one central perspective you were just getting at, which is this notion of scarcity, because it's a paradigm so many people, even if just partly, we exist in, we retreat to. What does it mean to live in that paradigm, and how is it different from a paradigm of abundance?
Well, I mean, I think if you look at that today, we all get really huffy and puffy about worrying about our planet, right? And this really amazing to me is that we live on this spacecraft and we say, I am worried about our planet. And if you were to listen to the planet will tell you, don't worry about me, worry about the human species because I'm going to do just fine, right? And in fact, if you think about it, 65 million years ago, or give or take, when the asteroid hit the planet Earth, every single species we call dinosaurs completely disappeared. Planet, in fact, did so fine, it created humans, right? So humans were created out of the ashes of these dinosaurs, right? Now, imagine if human species disappear, it is not that planet would do somehow the planet will disappear. Maybe there'll be a superhuman species that will come out the ashes of the human side. What if we care about us enough, we need to get rid of this mindset that we are limited to scarcity of living on this spacecraft. I mean, just think about for a second. If we believe we can live anywhere in our solar system, and why limit ourselves to our solar system? Because one day our sun is going to implode like every other star does. And then the human species will get wiped out. So why not move away from our solar system to actually a different solar system? Why stay within the galaxy, move to a different galaxy? Why even limit to a different galaxy? Why not spread out to different universes? So idea is there is no limitations of where we can live, right? And this mindset of scarcity comes in because our belief system is so strong that somehow we believe that we humans cannot live anywhere else. And there is a scarcity of what we can do. And I'm going to, just give you a simple things to think about, that even if you tell someone that we can live in our own solar system on Mars, what is the first thing they ask you? Fine, you can go to Mars, but how are you going to grow the food on the Mars? And that to them is the limitation that says until you can find a way to grow the food, you cannot live there. Now, if you ask a slightly different question, and they says, why do we eat food as humans? The only reason we need food is we need energy and we need nutrition. Now, if you say energy, there are bacterial species that grow in a radioactive nuclear waste. Think about that. That means that our species that are as small as bacteria have figured out how to protect their DNA from radiation. So they don't need to live in a biosphere, right? And they have figured out how to use the radiation as a source of energy. Now, what if we can take a genetic material from these bacteria, use CRISPR to modify our own genes, and suddenly we humans are now able to walk in the radiation. And when we go for a walk, we are actually getting the energy that we need. So it's, honey, let's go out for a walk and get some radiation. Not, honey, let's go out and get some pizza. Now, that is just one part. Second part is nutrition. What kind of nutrition do we need? Well, we need hydrogen, we need oxygen. What if we have water? If we can find water, can't we get hydrogen and oxygen? And now, point I'm trying to make is by simply asking a slightly different question, instead of asking how do we grow food, we simply ask ourselves, why do we eat food? Now we have an unlimited potential of how we can solve the problem. And suddenly a problem that looked like, oh my God, it is impossible, so we're stuck on Earth. We say, oh, really, that's a solvable problem. We can live on Earth and Moon and Mars and beyond anywhere we want. Now, same type of thing happens. People say, well, we need to somehow find a way to do sustainability of the planet. And the sustainability has become a synonym with conservation. And we all know that conservation cannot allow you to create abundance. Sustainability or conservation is a short-term fix. So for example, we say, look, we need to conserve air and you need to start breathing less. And you say, fine, I would every minute or so, I would take a few second break and I will not breathe, and I'm okay with that. Now you say, oh, no, you need to conserve more. And then fine, I will do it for a little bit more longer. And after a while, you say, you know what, I can't live anymore. And what the question really comes down to is, why is it that we all believe that today there is an abundance of something, we have no value to it? And when the things are scarce, we put value to it, right? So today we fight over land, we fight over water, we fight over energy. Mm-hmm. But none of us fight over air. We go all in a stadium, 100,000 of us cheer for our favorite team, and we never slap the guy next to us. I saw you take a deep breath. That's my air. We say, enjoy, take as much air, because we believe it's in abundance. Now imagine what energy could be the next air. Every 90 minutes on this planet, we get more solar energy than we use in the whole year. It's simply a matter of conversion. And once we get that conversion going, then we will have abundance of free energy, just like air. It is going to be democratized, it's going to be demonetized. And once that happens, we'll have free, fresh, clean water, because we can desalinize the water, we can distill the water because of free energy, right? So suddenly the things that we fight over, land, which is abundance in our universe or beyond our universe, the energy that is so abundant we can get anywhere, the water that's going to be so abundant that we can get as much as we want, then what is there to fight over? And my point I'm trying to make is, it is because our belief system says these things are not possible. The minute we start to believe these things are possible, then people suddenly realize that there is no reason for us to be finding these scarcity and focus on conservation when we can focus on creating abundance.
You share a hysterical but profound example as well with Napoleon, I think it was, who 150 years ago was serving the rarest metal on earth. When his fine guests came over for the gala, they got the aluminum. It was the rarest metal. The second-rate citizens who came, they got the gold.
Yes.
And now aluminum is the most abundant. So how things change. Now, people lack a sense of curiosity. And I'm gonna fault myself here. I thought I was curious until I read your book. And then you took it to an entirely different level. So this is a really, really game-changing concept. You say, if you look at the arc of human progress throughout history, it's not that we have invented all these wonderful answers.
Yep.
No, it's that we actually asked different questions.
Yep.
And in asking the questions with that curiosity, we invented a new future. So what can we do to cultivate even more of this beautiful curiosity that gets us to ask questions instead of dogmatically defining limitations, like you're saying?
I think, there are a couple of very simple framework that actually our children, when they were young, we use the same framework. So every time you look at the possibilities of connecting the dots that have never been connected before, right? So, when our kids were young, instead of reading them the stories, we came up with this idea that I'm going to give them 3 or 4 things that are completely disconnected, and their job is to create a coherent story about connecting them together. So I would say there is an ocean, there is a monkey, and there is a sky and stars, and now you connect them, how these things are all connected. Now they have to use the creation of the things. How can the things that are seemingly disconnected can actually all be connected? Now, other framework that we really use was, every time they come back and say, this can't be done, and we simply will stop them and say, okay, let's assume it could be done. What are the things that needs to happen for it to be done? That means, imagine, what are the things that have to be solved for this problem to be solved? Like you say, hey, we want to be able to live on the Mars. Great. Don't say we can't do that. Say, okay, what has to happen? Well, we have to be able to leave the Earth orbit. We have to be able to travel there a long distance. We have to be able to land when there is no atmosphere. Well, guess what? Once we start to break down what problems have to be solved, suddenly everything starts to look like, well, this is not difficult. This is not difficult. This is already solved, right? And then you start to break down the barriers of what is possible.
An awesome exercise. I would call it an experience. I can't wait to do with my kids and with myself. So there's something that happens when we're in this state of possibility, of curiosity, that's very different from how so many of us operate day to day. Anxiety is no stranger to us. We're setting records probably every day with being on more anti-anxiety meds across our country, across the world. But anxiety, you point out, is something that's actually healthy. It's healthy because it exists, and you put this so beautifully, so eloquently, so insightfully. It exists between our present reality and our imagined future. And in that distance, there exists this incredible creative possibility that is the essence of entrepreneurial possibility, of entrepreneurship. But something happens. A lot of people, and I've been guilty of this at times for sure, they transmute this anxiety into fear. So I know you're not a psychologist, even though I think your insights penetrate far beyond most psychologists by an order of magnitude. Why do you think that anxiety shifts to fear, and what can we do about it?
Yeah, and I think the reason the fear comes along is the fear comes when there is unknown. When there is a known, there is no fear. So how do you turn the unknowns into known? So when there is a dark, we always see there is a monster under the bed, and you turn the lights on and there is none, and everybody feels comfortable. We all can walk during the daytime in the same alley and we feel okay. And the minute that it becomes dark, we say we don't know what exists because we can't see. And that's what creates a fear. So fear comes from not knowing what is going to happen. And that is what creates fear. So the knowledge, it becomes the light that actually turns the darkness into the light. And that turns the human mind fear into possibilities, and the possibilities into reality.
So I hear you there. And there's always going to be blind spots or areas where we're ignorant. Now, at the same time, you say don't feel like you've got to figure everything out, right? Actually, this ignorance is an enormous invitation to humility. Most people, myself included, at least most of the time, we shun ignorance. We're not so happy about being ignorant, right? Or deficient in areas. But you say there's enormous possibility in that ignorance. And actually, what we should do is we should go full tilt into just indulging that ignorance, in opening it up, in welcoming it. And I know you probably don't give pep talks on ignorance regularly, but give us a pep talk, because it is so inspirational to get permission and encouragement to really indulge our ignorance and these blind areas.
Oh my God, Josh. So first of all, once you become good at something and you become expert at it, in my opinion, you become useless in that field. And the reason is suddenly you become incrementalist. That means you are now taking everything that you have learned as a foundation that's given. Now, someone who is ignorant or non-expert comes along, is able to challenge the foundation and saying, why does it have to be done this way? And suddenly they are able to rethink and recreate the whole industry that gets completely disrupted, because they actually rethought what experts have taken the foundation as granted. And that is the beauty of being ignorant. So when you are naive or ignorant or non-expert, that is your biggest asset. So when someone tells you, how can you disrupt healthcare? You're not a scientist, you're not a doctor, and you say, well, that is the reason I am the most dangerous person that the field has ever seen, because I am going to rethink about why they are doing the way they do. So if you look at today's medical industrial complex, everyone in that medical industrial complex makes money when you are sick. I mean, you're not sick, they don't make a penny from you. right? So when you are healthy, they don't make a dime from you. And when you are sick, they make money from you. So now if they can imagine that you have a chronic disease, to them, you have a lifetime subscriber now, because every day you're going to be taking their medicine, whatever it is. You have a heart disease, I got a cholesterol drug for you. You got autoimmune disease, I got a biologics. And by the way, I'm not going to cure it, because if I cure it, you're gone away, you're gone. So I'm going to keep you there by suppressing your symptom. So I have a lifetime business. So now let's assume, pick any of these diseases like autoimmune disease. It's a $10 billion a year industry for a pharma company. And they believe that somehow they can cure this industry. They're going to only make $1 billion. And they are looking at themselves and thinking that's a $9 billion loss. You come along and you said, holy cow, if we can solve this problem, there is $1 billion to be made. And you're willing to take that $1 billion because you don't have any baggage. You are willing to take from zero to $1 billion. That's a massive industry. So you go out and actually find a cure and make $1 billion. Now, they don't want to do that because they're going to lose 9, but for you, it's a gain of 1, right? And that is the beauty of coming in from the outside industry, because you have absolutely no baggage to protect.
Incredible perspective. So we've got to get into your ventures in a bit, but there's also a kind of wiring that I think people need in order to have an appetite for change. And while as entrepreneurs, we generally have a fairly vigorous appetite for change, we also love control. And you point out change is something we tend to resist. So if you look at the forest fire, the forest management industry, they, for 100 years, they went through so many pains to prevent fires. But the fires, they're part of nature. They're a healthy part of the symbiosis we have with our planet, right? They cleanse the forest. They cleanse the forest floor. They rid the forest of disease. And after 100 years of trying at all costs to stop fires, they finally said, let nature work its way. And too big to fail, same thing. You said, look, we're propping up these companies and they're like the forest that need to burn down. They're not serving us. Let nature run its course. Because if they're too big to fail, what about the too small to save? The competitive companies that are generating value. So I'm curious how you can encourage people, us as entrepreneurs, to have an even more vigorous perspective and appetite for change.
Well, first of all, the good thing is it is happening whether we like it or not. Half of the Fortune 500 companies will not exist in the next 10 to 15 years because the technology is moving so fast. And these are guys big companies have all these baggages that they have to protect, and they are suddenly dying faster and faster space. So it used to be, you will say, well, there is somebody ahead of me. They have already been 5 years before me. I am actually no longer can participate. Now I look at someone who is 5 years ahead of me. Well, they are actually 2 years closer to being died while I'm using the exponential technology to disrupt them. That means every single new company that is starting using the technologies of today or tomorrow are going to benefit from the exponential curve that the current companies cannot use because they have a asset or the base or a baggage, whatever you want to call it, and that stops them from going there. And to me, if you look at the taxi companies were disrupted by Uberization. And the Uber is going to get disrupted faster than any other industry got disrupted by, if you get the self-driving cars, the reason Uber succeeded is because they were able to actually create a network of drivers and the passengers, right? Mm-hmm. And they needed the drivers to be able to create a marketplace. Guess what? Now the car manufacturer becomes the driver. So suddenly the Tesla becomes an Uber on day one because they have millions of these cars everywhere that can take you anywhere you want. So idea of these technology come along, suddenly disrupting the market leader who thought they disrupted someone else is happening at a faster and a faster pace, right? And that is really what entrepreneurs should be thinking about, is that there has never been a better time to be alive. This is the decade where most industries that you thought could not be disrupted, going to be disrupted. I'm telling you, whether it is healthcare, whether it is education, whether it is agriculture, whether it is energy, whether it is manufacturing, whether it is construction, whether it is real estate, it is going to be massively disrupted. And we are already starting to see some of the trend during COVID. People thought that housing in the urban areas will always be Manhattan, will always, the real estate value have to hold because every business is there and the value will always be there. And now people are realizing you can work out of a remote beach somewhere else. And now people are saying the house prices in Manhattan have crashed by 50%, right? And that is just the beginning. Because now imagine, once you start to create a virtual reality workspace, your brain doesn't know you're not sitting in your space in an open office or whatever your environment was. Your brain knows you're there. And in fact, you will be able to transmit all of the same signals. I'm going to just slightly go tangent here because I think I want to get this concept because it's so interesting, is that we humans basically see not through our eyes, but through our brain. We don't hear from our ears, but hear through our brain. So basically what happens is all the senses we have are simply sending the signal to the brain, and brain is actually seeing, oh, this is what's happening. And I've seen that before. So you're probably in Seattle. Or you're probably now, I looks very similar to New York. So you are in New York, or you happen to, I see you are on a beach here. You're probably in Sydney, right? So you are basically through these senses know where you are by looking at the thing, by smelling it, by touching it. And that's how you know what's going on. Now imagine if there are remote signals that are sending the signal to your brain, directly connected your brain to these sensors. Does it know? Brain doesn't know this signal actually came from your eyes or it came from a sensor. And suddenly you are transported as if you are in a completely different location. And now what if you can do them in simultaneously? So like my mother used to always say, you can't be in two places at the same time. Now mom can be proven wrong. I actually can, because my haptic feedback of touching a person, and I could be next to you, touch hand, and I know you're there. In fact, even when I am right next to you and I shake your hand, it feels like actually you're real. And if you think about it for a second, we are basically made of atoms, right? Atoms are made of electrons and protons. They're made of quarks. They're made of energy. We are really just a bundle of energy. But when energy interacts with each other, we get this sense of I'm holding something, I'm touching something. And that is all the mind's perception of what is happening, right? That is unreal. That is not happening. That's just the energy, two energy colliding. And we see, I just shook hand. But that can easily, the brain can easily be fooled. Anyone who has played a virtual reality game knows when you see yourself at 45 feet high and you say, this thing is breaking, I need to take a step forward. You cannot take a step forward because brain says you're going to die. And even though you know in reality, that's not where you are. And I have personally done it. It is so difficult. You step up on a plate and you literally take an elevator in the virtual reality, and now you're 45-story high. Elevator starts to break and it shows you could take a step out of there. And honestly, I take a step out and I cannot touch the earth because it's just about this high. And now people, adults scream that they're going to die. And you take the headset off, you say, look, you're only 18 inches out. You can take a step up. My point is, mind does not know, it's not real, right? And that's the beauty. What I'm trying to say is that one day, when you start to see the brain interfaced with all these outside things, and you have unlimited amount of brain in neocortex, that is your cloud. So just limiting yourself to the, basically the neocortex that was designed to head can only be this big. And the reason the head can be only this big is because that's the biggest object that can go through the birth canal, right? And that's the only reason we have only this much of a neocortex. And now you can expand it to have unlimited memory, unlimited execution power, unlimited thoughts. And guess what? Now, instead of my going to 4 years in a college, what if I can upload every top professor's brain, every book I can upload? I can even subscribe to someone's brain. So as they learn more, I am automatically updated. Now, imagine you going out on a date and you have a knowledge of every single person who interacted with her, what she liked, what she did not like, and you can suddenly be the perfect person, right? Now, imagine if you can read everyone's mind. And God, that I hope that never happens, because we all have thoughts that we never want to express, right?
What an extraordinary tangent that is. I don't think it's a tangent. You deepen the discussion. Let's go there. So imagination is something that you describe as a capacity to conceive of what is not. How do we cultivate this capacity for imagination?
We have that. I mean, that is called dreaming. I mean, we all daydream all the time. In fact, what happens is every single time we close our eyes, we see our future of what we want to be. So we have unlimited potential. We see that in ourselves. We dream about it. We imagine about it. So it's not that. The problem that happens is we never act on it, right? And the reason we don't act on it is because we don't believe we are capable of doing it. Our reality is here, our imagination is here, and we don't know how to fill that gap. And the way you fill that gap is taking one step at a time to say, I'm going to take the first step to learn how to get there. And then every single day, I'm going to take a step that gets me closer to there. And then we start to interact with the people who are already there, and they show us the next step, and they show us the next step. And that is the beauty, is you change, and the change is so gradual. The people who are with you never notice it. And the people who have not seen you in 5 years say, you have completely changed. And that is really the beauty of the thing, is that, when people tell you that it's the last straw that breaks the camel's back, and you and I both know it's not the last straw, it is all the other straws that we have put in before that breaks the camel's back, right? So my point is, the knowledge is always incremental. It's not someday there is a breakthrough that happens. In fact, every breakthrough stands on the giants of some other shoulder, right?
Amen. Now, one of the many concepts that's a real paradigm shift you invite people to along those lines is, it is, as you put it, it's the building, the accretions of so many different self-talks, mind shatters, things that pile up and break the back, and it's fear. There's so much fear mongering, and it makes sense. It's a business model for news, and as you put it, and I love it, the Crisis News Network, but all the media outlets, they thrive on that because it sells. There's a biological basis. Thousands of years ago, in the savannas of Africa, you say, we would have been deleted from the gene pool if we didn't get the bad news. We're programmed to select for bad news. The good news, we didn't miss much if we missed the good news.
Yep.
But then there's so much of it on this kind of cycle where we just digest, and we can't insulate ourselves from the accretions of so much kind of tuning to that bad news. And then there's this other place, which is the world of possibility you're inviting us into, and that is endless. It's boundless. Talk a little bit more, and I know in different ways I'm kind of asking the same question, but there are distinctions, and you draw these out so well. Talk about how you change your mental programming in order to escape, or at least tune out more of that negativity that's counterproductive, and step into possibility.
So, think about, again, the fear of failure is one of the biggest thing that stops us from doing things, right? So if you look at the two parts of the puzzle, one is our power not to be able to imagine what we are capable of doing, and then we have a fear of failure. And in fact, if you think about it, these were the two things the communist government used to make sure they can control you. They took away your power of imagination, and they gave something in return, which was a fear of failure. That means if you ever did something that was outside, God, you don't want to get caught because you are dead. right? And that fear of failure, they took away their power to imagine. They took away everything. You could see what was happening outside their world. So you couldn't see, oh my God, people actually do this in America. And they couldn't see that. So they took away all that. So they censor everything that gives them hope. So they take away all the hope, all the imagination, and they insert the fear in that. And that is, to me, is a complete recipe for a person who is going to never go anywhere. They live like a doormat, right? So one of the interesting things I realized as an entrepreneur, that as an entrepreneur, your life needs to be alive. And how do we ever know you're alive? Is you have a heartbeat. What does the heartbeat look like? It goes up and down and up and down. This is what tells you you're alive. And when you have a smooth life, you're dead. So what happens is every single time you ask yourself, I am choosing to live a smooth life, is you're choosing to live a life of a dead person, right? When you have the downs, all you have to know is to hunker down, because the next beat is going to be up. And when you are on top of that beat, never get too cocky, because no, the winter is coming and winter shall come. Right? And that is the beauty, is that no, these ups and downs are going to happen. That means expect the ups and downs and accept them when they happen. And the second thing that I've really, internalized for myself is, when something happens, if you don't label them as good or bad, because you don't know until much later that what is happening is actually good or bad. Right? You and I can all probably come up with 10 things that in our life we thought, oh my God, at that time that were just the absolutely soul crushing.
100.
Right? Soul crushing, and you look back and say, boy, that was the best thing that ever happened, right? And there's actually a Chinese tale that really interesting, that actually lays it out in a very simple story. So there is this farmer who actually takes all his money and buys this horse, because he wanted to have a horse for his child, right? And then all his money, and one day the horse runs away, and then all the villagers are laughing at him that, look, you had everything and now you lost everything. You are the unluckiest person. A month later, the horse comes back with 4 more mares. And then suddenly they say, oh my God, you are the luckiest man. Look at how much you have created, right? And then, one day one of the horses taps on the son's toe, and now the son cannot walk. And they're singing, everybody's laughing at him that, God, look, you wanted to be somebody, and now you have only one son. When you grow up old, the son is not going to take care of you. You're the most unlucky person in the world. Guess what? A month later, all the troops walk in there, and they say, we are drafting the people of young age. Anyone who can walk properly is going. And they took everybody's son, they left his son behind. And they say, you are the luckiest person who has your son with us. So my point is, in our life, we can look back at any event that looks, oh my God, this is what's going to kill me. Whether it's, break up with a girlfriend or whatever, and you look back 10 years later and say, boy, save that nightmare.
So listening to this could be like a meditation for so many entrepreneurs, because that is the world we inhabit, and it will never change as long as we're part of the real world. Yeah. So you bring to this faith, and actually it's interesting because you're a very critical thinker, but that's not in conflict with faith. You describe faith as a state of being, a way of being. Share a little bit more about that, because it is so powerful for the skeptics, the critical thinkers out there who see them sometimes at odds with each other.
Not really. I mean, the belief system is what makes us who we are. And, even if the people who are the most, I would say, clear thinker or scientist, and, I'm not a religious person, but if you look at the religion, it's really, what I find really interesting is how much they actually have in common. And in fact, science and religion are becoming one, in my opinion. Let me tell you why. In religion, they say there is a God that created us. And if you are a scientist, you say we probably are living in a simulation, and there is a programmer who created us, right? The religion says your destiny is pre-written. And the scientists say it is an algorithm that drives us. That means it is pre-written, right? So my point is, we're using the different words. We're saying a programmer is a god, algorithm is a destiny, right? But we're starting to see the same thing, that we really, people say, well, in religion, you talk about karma and you actually reincarnation. In the science, you say we are this actually just simple energy. And when you die, the energy becomes part of this global energy. And when you're born out of the energy, because energy can never be destroyed. It can only take a different shape. So in some sense, there is a reincarnation of that energy always happening, right? But you start to think about the parallels of the thing. It's just amazing to see that, even though we use different words, but in parallel, we're talking about the same thing. In religion, they say there is nothing real. Everything is, in like Hindu words called Maya, is all illusion. And we see the same thing in science. We're living in this simulation. This is really nothing. It's all simulation. So there you have it.
Incredible. So I know we have just a few minutes left. One thing you do that is bold, and entrepreneurs need to be bold. It is not a world for the meek of heart, is you talk about Plato's cave, an incredible allegory of the guy who's shackled. He breaks free of his shackles and he sees the light and it almost blinds him, but that's the truth. And he goes back into the cave and he tries to tell everybody about the light and the truth, and he invites them to it, but it's so painful for them to even think about. They savage him, right? So Plato's cave is a place that the rebels, those who challenge orthodoxy, need to go. And you go there. I'm not going to savage you, but you already brought up what you see as the greatest threat to mankind, which is the sustainability movement as it exists. You also talk about social entrepreneurship, right? Very popular kind of movement, if you will. You say, well, social entrepreneurship is kind of shitty entrepreneurship because it doesn't scale. Tell us more about this idea.
Is if you want to do a small good in the world, you should do a nonprofit. If you want to do a large good in the world, then you start for profit. And the reason is that the profit is the engine that allows you to scale to help more people. So if you can find a way to help 1 billion people live a better life, you can create a $500 billion company. Right? And that is the most powerful thing we have to know. To create a massive enterprise as a capitalist, all you have to do is to solve a massive problem. And it so happens these massive problems happen to be the social problems, right? So when you tell someone you are an entrepreneur, guess what? What you're saying is that you're actually solving a massive problem. You don't say you're a social entrepreneur, because when you tell someone an adjective in front of an entrepreneur, you're a female entrepreneur. That means you're really not good, but you happen to be doing something. You're female, you're a social. But what you're saying is, if you are a great entrepreneur, you're a moonshot entrepreneur, you are saying you're solving a massive problem, and that happens to be social problem, and you're doing good and doing well, more power to you, right? And that to me is the key, is that people need to realize that doing good and doing well are not mutually exclusive. In fact, the only way to do well in the long term is to do a tremendous good. Help 1 billion people live a better life, and you can create a $500 billion company.
I mean, again, so one industry, you point out so many industries, healthcare and education, and how so many of them are anachronisms at this point. But let's just take healthcare, which you call, as you did earlier, sickness care. And the notion that we're only treating symptoms and not the root causes, the underlying causes, is why the industry can go on as succeeding with its mission. It was designed to treat symptoms, not to make the underlying causes go away. Now, what my team and I do, by the way, is we go into companies and we help them scale up by solving problems at the root level, by building healthier organizations. What I've discovered is virtually no organizations are strong at solving problems at the root level. They're in firefighting mode.
That's right.
And I'm curious, because you talk about how we're educated, or perhaps miseducated in so many ways, why you think we've grown to a society where we deal so much at the symptomatic level, so little at the root level, to the point where industries exist to deal with symptoms. Why have we evolved that way?
I mean, number one reason is instant gratification, right? So the fact is, as soon as you get rid of the symptom, your dopamine gets released. Oh, the symptom is gone. It doesn't mean it won't pop up, or it is a vacuum mode. You whack here and it pops up here, right? And that's literally what happens today. So you take a drug that suppresses one symptom, it causes 3 more symptoms. You take now 3 more drugs that cause 9 more symptoms. And by the time you get old, you're popping more pills than blueberries. And there is a problem with that approach sooner or later, right? So what we realized was, what if we actually understand the human body at a molecular level? What if we can digitize the human body to understand every single biochemical activity? Then not only we can tell you what's happening in your body. So today you can go to Viome.com and you can order a kit. And when you do that, you send the sample back to us from home, and then we give you back the information. What is your actual biological age? That means how well are you aging? What is your gut health? What is your cellular health? What is your mitochondrial health? And then we tell you, not just enjoy. Unlike many companies, like DNA test, you do a DNA test and you say, you're 8 times more likely to get Alzheimer's, enjoy your life. We actually tell you what to do now. We say, don't eat broccoli because we see your sulfide production is too high. Stop taking vitamin B3 because your uric acid production is too high. And by the way, you shouldn't be taking curcumin or turmeric that you think is good, because we're noticing your bile acid production is too high, right? And by the way, spinach, even though Popeye told you to eat spinach is good for you, Popeye was not a scientist. We are looking at your oxalate pathways and they're not very active here. Is going to end up getting a kidney stone for you. And you're eating way too much protein because we see the ammonia being fermented here. And guess what? You need to take a digestive enzyme with your protein. And then, so we tell you what foods to eat and why, what foods to avoid and why, and what nutrients your body really needs, and everything else that you're taking are actually harming you. And then we can actually make those supplements and nutrients for you on demand with only those ingredients in that dosage and ship it to you every month. Whether it is a food extracts, vitamin, minerals, herbs, digestive enzymes, probiotics, prebiotics, you get everything. And the reason for that is what brings the body's root cause of inflammation. So if we can bring the inflammation in our body down, all the things we call symptoms are the diseases. That all chronic diseases are actually, the reason is a chronic inflammation. And if you can get rid of the chronic inflammation, the things we named them as a disease actually are just the symptoms of that inflammation, whether it's a depression, whether it's an anxiety, it's obesity or diabetes or heart disease, it's Alzheimer or Parkinson or cancer. These are all the diseases of actually imbalance in the body, imbalance of your microbial interaction and the human gene expression. And if you can actually understand that interaction, you can solve the underlying root biochemistry of the problem.
What a magnificent company. And this is already for consumers. If they
Yes.
go to Viome, they can start getting the solution for some
Yes.
of their disease. Incredible. I could go on actually for days, but you need to get back to building the future that is going to help all of us make disease optional. I cannot overstate my gratitude. It is just incredible to have your insight, to have your guidance, and even your example, which comes through in how you share what you share. So thank you so much for joining me and sharing this with our community. It really is an honor to be able to share this information with other entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Josh. It's been an honor and a pleasure, and I look forward to continuing our conversation.